you can help us understand the contradiction. You have family members who were enslaved here at Mount Vernon, and I believe your work of chronicling your family is about the only really work where you can chronicle an enslaved family, an African-American family from, was it 1864, certain until today?
1684.
1684, and it transposed. That makes it much more significant. 1684, but you said you can even go back further than that, probably.
Yes.
All right. Can you help us? How do you see George Washington, someone that many of us here admire? But tell us, what is your sense of it?
Well, we use the word complexity. We use the word challenge. We use the word threat as far as the survival of our democracy and our country as a nation. But I think we also have to realize that the strength of who we are today and how we got here is deeply rooted in the backbones of those who physically built this country. Block on block, brick on brick. Can't see in the morning, but can't see at night. 6 days a week, sometimes 7. And they are the unsung. So books could be written, and a book on the Quander family, like you mentioned, the Quanders in 1684, an enduring African-American legacy. It's in the bookstore. What we wanted to do and what we have done, as chronicling our history, we discovered that actually we go back another decade into the 1670s, possibly even the 1660s, and transcend over to the Fanti people in Ghana, West Africa, where the name Quander and Amquando are Fanti names, where we believe we came from. But the strength that we have is one of resilience, focus, determination, and most importantly, is not necessarily at all unique, because there are so many African-American families who are based from Africa, of course, who brought that resilience, that strength, that focus, that determination to prove that what they knew from across the water in Africa could be transcended to here in the New World. The techniques in terms of food ways, music ways, architecture ways, doesn't necessarily mean you had to build a pyramid, but you could take a stepping stone and turn it into a building. You could take those lemons and turn it into lemonade. And as time progressed, there are so many records that were written of resistance. And fortunately, our name shows up in a number of them. In one particular case, the enslaver in 1684, just across the river from the Maryland side, wrote his will, and he provided for the eventual freedom of his enslaved. Wrote that will in 1684. When he died in 1686, that created a situation where they were freed. But we carried the story of a brother who did not get his freedom, had another master, and we were looking for that master, looking for that brother. And guess what? I'm not saying we have it, but a couple of months ago we may have found it. And what is it? I'm saying it's a definite maybe. You've heard that term before. So where did that come from? All right, I think everybody in this room knows about the Georgetown 272 project. Georgetown University had a history of having sold off, Georgetown College then, a lot of enslaved Africans. They weren't Americans. The Dred Scott decision said they weren't American citizens and could never be. You know how long never is or was? All right. And if the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment hadn't come along, we'd still be maybe in servitude. But anyway, the Georgetown Project said we're going to see if we can find where those 272 people's descendants are. And they started looking, and as they started looking, they found that beyond the Georgetown group, there were others. And our ancestors, having the name Quander, were not in the Georgetown group, but guess what? They showed up in Louisiana. So we're going to look to see where these people came from. Where did they come from? And in the overwhelming majority of the cases, they looked at the ship manifest showing up in New Orleans and in Mississippi, and these names attracted back, and they were shipped from Franklin and Ailes. They were shipped from Annapolis. And who sold them, who transported them, who sold them off and transferred them? Other members of the Washington family. That was quite a surprise. We think that might be the answer, we're not sure, as to what happened to the other brother. But our family's history, and it's not unique because others have done the same. You may not know the details and specifics of your family, but I assure you, your family has a history. And I'm always telling people, don't talk about the Quanders have done this, that, and the other. That's us. But we want it to be an inspiration for what other people can do and have done. The 1619 Project is just an example. As I like to say, civil rights, we talk about, the civil rights movement of the 1960s. It didn't start then. The civil rights movement, from my perspective, started in August 1619, right here in this state, down in Port Comfort, downstate Virginia. And the black strength, the black resilience, the black focus, the black determination, the black creativity is who we are. And what he said just now, or said about building the White House and building the United States Capitol, we also were involved in building the first Smithsonian, the castle. Also building other places like the foundation for the Washington Monument, laying out of the original streets. And this is not necessarily somebody with the Quander name, but it's somebody who was focused, determined, and spiritual. We brought with us a certain degree of spirituality from Africa. Many of us transitioned that into what we call Christianity. And like Michael here, I was educated by Augustine. You went to the same high school. Yeah, he came after me. I think he graduated last year. But you've got to understand that this place that we live in is a very complicated place. It's a place that evolved over time. And I was just looking, reviewing what Frederick Douglass said about what to the slave is the meaning of the 4th of July. And he delivered that on July the 5th, 1852, talking one day after. And he said several admirable things about George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Madison, the founding fathers, what great men, what great heroes, how brave they were, how determined and focused they were. And then he switched, because he brought up the institution and said, all of this liberty, equality, fraternity, and hope that they were talking about breaking away from George III, why is it that that didn't extend to those who were enslaved? And he says, the evil that men do lives after them. So he was recognizing the heroes, and he was recognizing the flaws, the humanity. I mean, I had a cousin, an ancestor, whose probate papers were filed on July the 2nd, 1776. She died in June. And I often wonder, what would Margaret Quander have said, knowing that this forthcoming Declaration of Independence is coming forth officially on the 4th of July. Her papers are filed on the 2nd of July. What would she have said about the promises and the hopes that had been embodied into that document that wouldn't apply to her? She was black, even if she was free. She was a woman. She didn't have any property to speak of, and not being a white male with property, she couldn't vote. And her focus was not lost on us, because we have records, court records, tax records, many of those court records where we fought in court against somebody or even each other and lost. But what did it show? Entrepreneurship, determination, I will not be denied. And that is the message that we like as Quanders to bring forth. We're the only African-American family with 4 generals. Only. We're the only African-American family that had 2 commandants at West Point. That's the number 2 man, including the one that just left last week, General Mark Quander. And I'm so honored that just yesterday I was called and asked to be the keynote speaker at Fort Belvoir because they're removing Robert E. Lee's name from Main Street. And they asked me, they're going to, the executive order, I'm going to 9811 if I got it right, that integrated the Army in 1948. I am honored to be asked to be the keynote speaker and bring the knowledge of these men and women, because we had many women involved, to the forefront.